Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday, April 8th. A very active weather pattern continues across much of the nation, ranging from a storm in California, producing some heavy rainfall down in the southern part of the state, to some strong to severe thunderstorms in the mid-Atlantic region that passed through the region in the overnight hours. It remains somewhat unsettled today with some scattered showers and thunderstorms in the mid-Atlantic region, and then a strong cold front will arrive in the eastern U.S. around midday on Thursday. It will be accompanied by some shower activity, maybe even a strong thunderstorm or two. Perhaps the bigger story will become the winds. They'll increase dramatically later tomorrow and continue at powerful levels tomorrow night and Friday in much of the northeastern quadrant of the nation, gusting to the 40 to 50 mile per hour range, maybe some potential damaging wind gusts again late tomorrow into the day on Friday. All that associated with a cold air outbreak that brings temperatures well below normal for the mid-Atlantic, the northeast U.S. on Friday and into Saturday. Then we all may have to deal with a strong storm system in the Sunday night, Monday time frame in the eastern U.S. That could have some heavy rainfall, and that storm will likely be associated with a pretty widespread severe weather outbreak later in the upcoming weekend across the southern part of the nation. And then yet another cold air outbreak arrives by the middle part of next week. Once that shot of cold air reaches the central and eastern U.S., the colder than normal pattern will really try to lock in for the remaining part of April, the second half of the month of April. We're not going to have every day below normal for the second half of the month in the central and eastern U.S., but I think when we look back on the last half of April, it will be below normal across much of the eastern half of the nation. One of the teleconnection indices that has been kind of giving us a signal of this change to a colder weather pattern in parts of the nation is the North Atlantic Oscillation. Here we go right now. It remains in negative territory. The black represent the actual observations of the North Atlantic Oscillation, the red, the forecast. Negative now, stays in negative territory for the next several days. And again, this time of the year, that generally is a favorable sign for cold air outbreaks being able to drop from Canada into the central and eastern U.S. Indeed, that appears to be the case for the second half of April. Well, it's not just the NAO that has been giving us this signal for a colder weather pattern for the second half of April. Other teleconnection indices like the EPO, for example, the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, continue to run in negative territory. That allows cold air to drop from southwestern Canada into the U.S. Here's another one. This is called the Madden-Julian Oscillation. It kind of tracks a tropical disturbance that propagates along the tropical region of the planet, and depending on what phase it's in, there are some favorable temperature and precipitation patterns with those particular phases depending on the time of the year. This is a forecast from the European model in green that shows the progression of the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. Again, the phases are what's important here. It goes in a counterclockwise fashion in this direction here over the next couple of weeks. This is phase 7, 8, 1, and 2 as depicted here by the forecast of the MJO by the European model. And these particular phases this time of the year generally favor colder than normal conditions in much of the central and eastern U.S. In fact, we can take a look at these composite temperature maps depending on the phase and depending on the time of the year, and we'll see that indeed phases 7, 8, 1, and 2 generally favor colder than normal conditions. So this is kind of a supportive idea to the NAO being negative and staying in negative territory. And here on the left we have those different temperature composites depending on the time of the year. It's kind of a rolling 3-month average here. This happens to be for March, April, and May. And we mentioned going through phase 7 into phase 8 and then 1 and 2. And here we go. Phase 7. Notice the blue here. Colder than normal conditions in phase 7. And then in phase 8, it's hard to see here, but there's some colder than normal conditions up and down the Atlantic seaboard. And then we have phase 1, and look at this, pretty much colder than normal on average in much of the eastern half of the nation, and same sort of thing here, phase 2 and even phase 3. So again, the MJO is kind of supportive of the idea that we have generally colder than normal weather coming for the central and eastern U.S., at least over the next couple of weeks. Well, let's kind of remain focused on the temperature pattern going forward. We'll take a look at the ensemble run of the GFS from 0Z last night. And again, cold air outbreaks definitely look like they will continue right through the remainder of the month of April into the central and eastern U.S. from northern Canada. And this time of the year, the sun is getting increasingly more and more effective in warming the southern U.S. with increasingly warm and humid conditions down across the southern U.S. Inevitable this time of the year, especially given the fact that the Gulf of Mexico sea surface temperatures are well above normal. That adds to water vapor being released into the atmosphere. So you have increasingly warm and humid conditions across the southern U.S. You combine that with cold air outbreaks from the north and west, and you really set up an active pattern, and an active pattern that definitely can include some severe weather outbreaks. I'm a little fearful of one later in the weekend across much of the southern U.S., again with this clash of the colder air coming from the north and west and the increasingly warm and humid air in the southern U.S. Well, here we begin on Wednesday morning here, and a lot of above normal conditions as we begin this stretch here. But let's move forward here and watch what happens. Again, today and even into tomorrow will be quite mild in the eastern U.S. But here we go with this cold air outbreak, and we have a strong cold front arriving in the eastern U.S. along the eastern seaboard around midday on Thursday. And here's a cold air outbreak that just expands from the northern plains all the way eastward into the mid-Atlantic, the northeast U.S. by Friday morning. Here we go. This is cold air outbreak number 1. Definitely below normal temperatures on Thursday night, Friday night, into the weekend, into Saturday. It's going to be followed by a warm-up here, but we'll move forward here and watch that yet another cold air outbreak is definitely going to follow that warm-up. Here we go now into the weekend, and then we have the potential of a very strong storm that may pull out of the southern states and into the eastern U.S. This is the Sunday night forecast map here of 850 millibar temperature anomalies. Warmer than normal conditions here. Look at upstream here, the cold air outbreak. And again, this clash zone could very well spell trouble for the southern, maybe even into parts of the central U.S. over the weekend with a potential severe weather outbreak as a storm gets organized. That could ride right up the eastern seaboard, could produce some heavy rainfall along the east coast Sunday night, Monday time frame. Let's keep moving forward here. Here we go now into Monday. Look at this cold air outbreak into the western and central U.S. at this time. This is Monday night forecast, and that slowly engulfs the eastern U.S. Here we are now by the middle part of next week, and look at this. This is quite an impressive area of below normal conditions at 850 millibars. And again, it expands into the eastern U.S. Has a little bit of a fight down across the southeastern U.S. thanks to those real warm sea surface temperatures across the Gulf of Mexico and the southwestern Atlantic. But this is now by next Thursday, a week away, a week plus 1 day away. Look at this expansive area, really the eastern 2/3 of the nation. And once this develops by the middle or latter part of next week, it really will kind of stick around, be sustained through much of the remainder of April. Let's just kind of go forward quickly here. Here we are now, Friday, April 17th, a week from this Friday. Still colder than normal throughout much of the eastern 2/3 of the nation into the weekend of the 18th and 19th. And we just keep moving forward here. And again, this is the ensemble run of the GFS from last night at 0Z all the way into now April 20th. And you can see a continuation of colder than normal conditions throughout much of the much of Canada and the northern U.S. all the way as late as April 24th. So we're getting really much of the second half of the month of April will be below normal, it looks like, from the central to the eastern U.S., and that will also include much of Canada as well. Well, let's now walk through last night's zero-Z GFS model run in terms of the surface forecast maps. Rainfall is now pushing south and east away from the D.C., Philadelphia, New York City corridor. There can be some isolated to scattered showers and thunderstorms that reform over the midday and afternoon hours. Certainly plenty of rain-free time today as well in D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. In fact, predominantly rain-free conditions today, and it'll be warmer. That frontal system that moved northward yesterday as a warm front is pretty much north of the I-95 corridor region from D.C. to New York City. Hence, afternoon temperatures will be quite a bit warmer than yesterday, in the 70s, well up in the 70s in D.C., maybe 70 plus degrees in Philadelphia as well. Then we start looking to the north and west, and here we go. By tomorrow morning, very strong cold front will be crossing the Ohio Valley into the Mid-Atlantic region. Looks like it passes off the East Coast by the mid-afternoon hours. This will not be a late day or nighttime frontal passage, but more of a midday, early afternoon frontal passage along the East Coast. And look at this, strong cold high pressure in south central Canada. Lots of snow across the southern part of Canada. And here we are, well into April now, still seeing these cold air outbreaks. Let's keep moving forward. Some showers associated with that cold frontal passage in the Mid-Atlantic region, primarily before the early afternoon, midday, and morning. Best shot tomorrow for these showers. Maybe an embedded strong thunderstorm or two mixed in. And then by later tomorrow, that system causes some more accumulating snow up across northern New England. This is the forecast map for Thursday evening, tomorrow evening, and this pressure gradient between this storm over northern New England and this high pressure system over the northern plains really intensifies, and that leads to increasingly strong winds and perhaps even some damaging wind gusts near 50 miles per hour or so late tomorrow night, and really through the day on Friday. Let's move forward here. This is a very tight pressure gradient. A little bit concerned about this. This is late Thursday night into early Friday. It could be 50 plus mile per hour winds again with this difference in pressure between the 971 millibar low here off of the northern Maine coast and this 1024 millibar high over the central U.S. That pressure gradient continues to produce strong winds throughout the day on Friday, and then things calm down. Here we are by Saturday. High pressure starts to edge into the Mid-Atlantic region. It will be much more settled conditions on Saturday. Still on the cool side of normal, however. And then we have to start looking down into the middle part of the country and the southern U.S. And again, I'm a little fearful of a severe weather outbreak across the southern U.S., maybe even a little bit into the central U.S. later in the weekend. We'll have a developing storm system here, very warm and humid air across the Gulf states, and this cold air outbreak, this next cold air outbreak already making an impact across the northern Rockies. Let's move forward here. And again, watch out for severe weather from, let's say, Texas to the Carolinas over the upcoming weekend. And then by the time we get into Sunday night in the Mid-Atlantic region, rains may begin, and this rain could turn out to be heavy at times Sunday night into Monday in D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, as the storm system rides up along the eastern seaboard, and the main low moves over the Great Lakes, but there'll be a secondary along the eastern seaboard. And then we get into the early part of next week. This is now the Monday morning forecast. Rain pretty much winding down in the Mid-Atlantic region early in the day on Monday, and then we look upstream for that next cold front, and it looks like again another cold air outbreak works its way all the way into the eastern states, certainly by the middle part of next week. And once that cold air outbreak arrives in the east, it tends to lock in, and it looks like generally a colder than normal pattern from this point through the end of April. So very active weather pattern across much of the nation over the next couple of weeks, it looks like, partly as a result of these continuing cold air outbreaks that will originate in northern Canada and drop into the central and eastern U.S. During much of the second half of April. So that's it for now. For PerspectaWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.